Vik Pandya, one of the rising stars here in comedy, based right here in Chicago. He's got a new YouTube special coming out. Actually, it's already out right now. Impromptu Conversations. Vik, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super pumped to be here.
Impromptu Conversations was the title. Did it come from one particular conversation?
I think it was, yeah, I mean, you do crowd work at a show where you're talking to the audience and, you just have these conversations and they're all on the spot. So I was like, how do you say that in a concise way? Because comedians are always trying to make things concise, but also imply with the name of the special to people that this is all like improv. It's not, pre-generated. Like you're going to hear some crazy stuff. You're going to hear some interesting things, but they're all on the spot. So I think impromptu is what I landed at because it was just so many back-to-back conversations that were all different and varied and unique and strung together in a special. There is like an arc that gets created, which is pretty cool.
How, do you go in with like a bag of tricks or just kind of knowing that who knows what's going to happen because someone may shout out something during a show, you may be planning to do a joke and someone may come at you with like left field, out of crowd work and you're like, whoa, I wasn't expecting this. Or how do you kind of plan for that?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously like a few little like things you could have in your pocket, like a couple lines to save things. But when you do crowd work for that long, you do 30 minutes, it's not the same as like, oh, what do you do for work? And then you have a quick little retort. It's like at that point, you're getting to someone's like history, like why they're in Chicago. So you can't plan for that. But that's kind of the fun of it is a lot of the moments and reactions I have are just genuine. It's also like trying to say what everyone else is thinking in the room. Like if someone has a crazy response and I just say, I'm like, well, why are you doing that? Like everyone in the room is like, that's exactly what we're thinking. And he said it. So it immediately gets this connection with the crowd. And I think that's what's cool about it is like you have this built up this trust with the audience at that point. So you can kind of get away with stuff. And the people who I'm messing with in the crowd, we did the special, we did a material before it. I did 30 minutes of just stand-up material. Then I did the crowd work. So you're only seeing the crowd work, but I've earned their trust for 30 minutes before, which is why I think they're already warmed up and they're already looser. So, I like digging myself in holes and trying to get out of them. And I think that's what this is a lot of that. It's a lot of me just being like, well, I'm going to say the one thing that I probably shouldn't say and then seeing how people react,
Because I feel like audience members always open up or people always open up. It's either like their barber or at a comedy show. Like those are the two times that you hear people.
That's a great analogy. I didn't even think about that. Barber is totally fine. You're just saying, you're be at the chair and you hear the guy next to you being like, yeah, so I killed that person in 92. And you're like, wow, this is a lot to say right now to a stranger, So
you just mentioned you're doing about 30 minutes of a show, but as an opener, you were doing like 10 minutes, between 7 and 10 minutes. And then you kind of work your way up to a headlining performer. And congratulations on all your success. As far as the material, the crowd work, I mean, how does that work as far as like in your mind where you're like, I'm going to plan for a shorter set and now the crowd's already warmed up. Now I could just like let them have it.
Yeah, I think that's what's cool about crowd work. It's like a weird, the longer you do comedy, you kind of build this rapport and relationship with the audience. And you kind of sense like when it's time to shift into crowd work. So I had structured my like kind of 30 minutes of material in such a way that I'm telling them a lot about myself. I'm also like talking about a lot of different topics. And so by the time I feel like, okay, now we're ready to shift into like, now you heard about me. Now it's time for me to go to you and hear something about you. I can kind of call back to what I was already saying. I can, as the show is happening, I'm looking at the crowd, the whole show and being like, all right, I'm registering this person had a reaction about this joke, like this guy is on this joke. So when I get to the crowd work, I kind of already have a few people that I want to talk to. And then as like, the crowd work is happening, that just keeps happening. Like, I'm like, oh, you reacted this way. So I keep kind of ping ponging off of people. So you kind of just feel it out. It's like a natural feeling. And I think like, it's my crowd too, right? It's like, I was headlining the House of Blues 2 shows. So people came to see me. So I kind of also have a little bit of like that credibility already built in. It wasn't like I was just doing it at like a pop-up, a set or something. So I think because of those two things, I was like, oh, I really know when this crowd is ready because they're all like people who kind of know who I am or are familiar with my comedy. So that was a huge help, I think, in doing it.
How do you prepare for maybe gigs you go into? I guess I'm talking more about the country club in, was it Rockford where, you have that crowd or you have a middle school that you're going to. And as far as like, who knows how this crowd is going to react because it's not your normal, improv or nightclub.
Yeah, it's tough because like I'm one of the comedians who does kind of everything. I do comedy clubs, but I also do like corporate gigs, I do like weddings, I do, birthday parties. So and even like schools, like from like colleges to like middle schools. So it really spans the gamut. And you got to think about your material. And you're like, first of all, for half the things I just said, you can't be dirty. You got to be clean. You can't cuss. The topics have to be clean. So that kind of takes your maybe hour of material down to like 20, 30 minutes. And then out of that 20, 30 minutes, you're like, well, what out of this is relatable to 12-year-olds? Maybe like 1 minute. So that's where a lot of the improv and crowd work comes in, because you can start to, as you're delivering the material, as you start to kind of find what's working with the crowd, you can kind of weave in, other elements and change your jokes on the fly. So that's kind of a lot of how to get through those gigs where it's a tougher crowd. And then also there is an element of like, some of these gigs, you're doing it for a check. You're like, this is just powering through, like, I'm like, I
This
got
is
to do
paying for my
40
car.
minutes
This is
here.
paying for rent. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to kind of accept that it's not going to be the best show, but there is an element of like, this is still a job, right? For those gigs. And a lot of times it's like, you may think it's going really badly, or you may feel weird, but then after the show, that's their only context of seeing you a lot of times. So they're like, oh, that was incredible. And you're like, well, I feel bad about myself, but I guess you're a fan of this. But we're comparing it to like a sold out comedy club, which is not what every event is, right? So you kind of have to think about it like that.
Especially too, I think when you go to a comedy club, and I'm just obviously generalizing here, but sometimes maybe not both people are, let's just say a couple is going, maybe not both of them are a fan of yours, but one person is like, I love Vik, we got to go and we'll get tickets.
Yeah.
And the person maybe like, so, or like, oh my goodness, I love this more than the person who suggested it. Does that have more of an impact on you? Or is it more like the 12-year-old at the random middle school who like, oh, he didn't think he was going to enjoy it, but now I feel like I got him, at an early age, and maybe he'll come see me when he gets old enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think both are cool. I mean, I think it is always like, it means more when you're expecting to fail or you're feeling like you're going to fail, and then someone comes up to you after and was like, I actually really enjoyed that. So the 12-year-old was a good example, because like after that show, I did this middle school gig. I had like 20 kids come up and they're like, can you sign, like they wanted me to sign their notebooks, like for autographs. And it was just very, you realize again, like you're like, oh, for them, this is a big event. Like a comedian is coming to the school, and you're like, for me, this is the lowest point of my career. You're like, I'm going to perform at a 12-year-old school, but it was very cool. And then like they wrote me notes and stuff, so that felt better, because I'm like, I know in 10 years these people are still going to know who I am and follow me. And we call that like turning the room, and that can apply to the other situation you mentioned, when it's like someone came in with no expectation and you were like, oh, I made them laugh, and now they're a fan, so you kind of converted them. So that always feels good too.
I want to talk about Roy Wood Jr., because I heard you were a big fan of The Daily Show. And how did the opportunity happen for you to open up for him?
Yeah, super crazy. I mean, I was like less than a year into comedy, and I was going to this open mic at Finley Dunn's, which is on the north side of Chicago. And they don't even do comedy there anymore, but they had a little back room, about a 40-seater, tight little room. They were doing an open mic there. And one of the guys who also was going there a lot was a new comedian as well. He was a college agent, so he would book like college entertainment for schools. And for some reason, he knew Roy Wood Jr. So this is before Roy was on the Daily Show at the time, but he was about to tape his first Comedy Central special. And this agent calls me up one day. He goes, hey, I'm working with this venue, Finley Dunn's. We have a big show we're putting together, because there's a guy who's going to record a special. He couldn't tell me the name. He was like, this guy is really big. He's going to do an hour at this venue. He's already passing through. He's in the area. So I'm putting together a show here. And he's like, do you want to do like 7 or 8 minutes up top? And I was like, this is huge. Like, I don't know who it is, but someone cool. And he didn't tell me. And then the day of the show, he's like, by the way, it's Roy Wood Jr. And I'm like a huge fan of Daily Show, huge fan of Roy already. But I was like, this is crazy. I get to be in the same room. And I'm like 8 months in. So I wasn't really doing a lot of good shows at the time. You were doing mostly open mics, bar shows. So to go from that to do a sold out, a sold out show in a cool venue that I was already comfortable in, it was kind of the best scenario for me. Because then I got to go up, like I wore a suit, did an 8-minute set, like best set of my life, and they recorded it. And it's a lot easier now to get clips, but at the time it was harder to get good quality clips. So they had to get like an HD setup. So I used that clip and that credit, and that got me into a bunch of comedy festivals and a lot of things, and kind of put me on the map in Chicago. So super grateful to Roy. Like, him and I still keep in touch. He got me tickets to come see the show a couple of years ago when I was in New York. So I'm just so happy for all of his success. And it's like, just he had no reason to talk to me at that, like after the show. He spent like a 45 minutes we were talking, and he's just such a nice guy. So, and his comedy is so kind of like what I try to imitate, is like it's very funny, but also like has points, you know.
That's awesome. As far as Zanies and your opening acts and headlining there and being a comedian there, obviously, we'll see things like John Oliver coming into town and doing a surprise set, or Hannibal Buress going in there. Who has been the craziest person, like either you knew or just like popped in there? You're like, oh my goodness, I have to perform in front of this person, or this person is sitting next to me as we're like watching the show.
Yeah, honestly, kind of sticking with the Daily Show theme, I was doing a show. It was like a patio show. This was a couple of years ago. It was outdoor. It was a fun show, like a good independent show, but kind of very like underground. Like you kind of had to know about it. And I'm about to go up, and then they're like, "Hey, Hassan Minhaj is here. He's going to do a set." So, and this is again when Daily Show is like height of the Daily Show. So Hassan Minhaj is we're both like in the stairwell, right, to go out to the show. So it's just me and him in there. And we kind of struck up a conversation. I was like, "Oh, Homecoming King had just come out." I was like, "I was a huge fan of your work." We took a selfie together. We looked kind of the same. Like, it was great. It was just very fun. And then he went up and like obviously killed, and I had to go up after that. And I'm like, "You saw Hassan, now see a very less successful version of Hassan." Like, I was like, this is so super fun. And yeah, just cool to be, and then he continued to kind of blow up after that. But that was probably the craziest one. I was like, not only in for, but also got to interact and hang out.
Awesome. And then the final thing here, as far as jokes go by, I mean, obviously there's things you can say in Chicago. You play venues all across the city and the suburbs, but there's jokes that are going to kill it with Chicago audiences. But when you're traveling to other states, are there things that like are so Chicago specific that you're like, this isn't going to land here, or it's just universal that people will, it's going to knock it out?
Yeah, I mean, I had like a big clip about, I had this like Lori Lightfoot chunk of material that was doing really well, and I was like roasting Lori Lightfoot. And I remember I did a gig in like Indiana, and I was like, I'm like, this is close enough. Maybe they know who Lori is. And it was like a real remote town in Indiana. I forgot what city, like Peru, Indiana, somewhere like wildly tiny. And I did the Lori joke there, and it just completely fell flat because they're like, "Yeah, we don't know who this is and we don't care." So I was like, "Oh, that's like, you can't be doing like red line jokes, in another city, because they don't know the CTA, they don't know the nuances." So yeah, I mean, there are this universal, we call it like road material that works everywhere. So I kind of knew better, but I was like, that joke was really killing. So I got a little cocky, and I was like, "Oh, this is going to work anywhere." And I'm like, "Nope, not true at all." Like,
so, you can't cross the state line with those jokes, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Vik, thank you so much for your time today. Impromptu Conversations. Check out the new special on YouTube, now streaming, and much success, and congratulations on everything you have going on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you.